Good afternoon, a good Erev Shabbos. We're getting ready for Shabbos and for the final days of Passover. A time when, unlike the first days of Passover, we don't look at the past as the exodus of Egypt, but we envision the future. A messianic world, a perfect world, a world of redemption. In fact, we say Shechianu on the first days of the holiday when we make the Kiddush, when we sanctify the days, but we don't say it on the last days. And the mystics tell us that the reason is because you can only make a Shechianu, a blessing on something new and special when you have it, not something that you envision for the future. And on Sunday, and therefore, since the last days of Passover is not about the past, but it's about the future, it's about envisioning a messianic era, we can't make the blessing of Shechianu. And on Sunday, in Shul, we will say Yizkor. Yizkor as a community. And right before Yizkor, the rabbis chose the most beautiful Haftorah to be read. A Haftorah that focuses on redemption, on a perfect world. It starts with the word V'yatza chayte migeza Yishai, and an offspring in the house of David will spring forward. And it speaks about a time when Vigor Ze'evim Keves, that a wolf and a sheep will live together. Mortal enemies will not kill each other. It speaks about a leopard and a kid living together without killing each other. It speaks about turning our swords into plow shields. But why did the rabbis choose this? Isn't Passover the time when we think about the past, about what happened? When we remember the exodus of Egypt? In fact, even by the Seder, the question is, why don't we focus on Elijah, the prophet? And why don't we focus instead on Moses? Moses is absent from the entire Haggadah. Yet we focus so much on the ultimate redemption, on the future, on envisioning a future. And the answer is very profound. You see, because Judaism has a revolutionary, unique approach to time. According to secular views, the past is what determined the future. Something happened a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. And that's going to, in turn, impact and affect us today. You look backwards to know what's going to happen today. But the Jewish philosophy of history is a little different. What happens in the Jewish world, vision of world, emanates not only from the past, but also from a divine promise about the future. History is shaped in two directions, by the past and the future. You know, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the famous book, A Man's Search for Meaning, says the story about one particular cold winter when he was in Poland. And he was weak, and he was a skeleton of a person. No socks, shoes, thin clothing, in the freezing cold winter. And they were commanded to march. And they were marching and marching the death march. And he was sick. He was weak. And he started coughing, and being so weak, he fell to the floor from his cough, and he couldn't get up. And suddenly a guard started beating him. And said, "Get up or you're going to die right here." He had no strength to get back up. He couldn't stand up. Recognizing that this was his last moments, seeing his mortality in front of his eyes, he closed his eyes and he imagined himself in Vienna post-war, giving a lecture in front of a few hundred people about something he's been thinking about and contemplating through the entire ordeal he had in the war, about the different people and how come some survive and some don't survive the war. Why some are able to survive and some not. And he closed his eyes and imagined there were 250 people in the audience. And as he's speaking to them about the difference of these people, he tells them about that day in Poland where he couldn't get up. And he was on the floor being beaten. And he got up because he imagined the speech he would give. And as he tells them about getting up, He actually got up. And imagining this day of when he would be able to give the speech that as if he was giving it then, he walked back to the camp in the cold. And all the way back to the camp. And as he was back in camp, he imagined this speech. And years later, he gave that same speech in Anaheim, California, in real life, in front of 7,000 people who gave him a standing ovation. You see, Viktor Frankl survived not because of what he had experienced in the present, but because he was able to envision a world, a brighter future, an act. He was able to act to bring it about. The Jewish people survived through millennia of suffering, of Holocaust, of torture, pogroms, not because of what we experience in the present or the past, but because even in the midst of their affliction, we never stopped believing in God's promise of a brighter future, and we acted to bring it about. I believe the Jewish vision of history, that there's a grand design for history. It's the noblest, most profound, and subtle attempt to give people purpose in life, to envision a time of Mashiach, a time of perfection, a world perfected. This has been such a hard year for so many. I heard of this little boy who turned to his mother. He lost his father during COVID. And this year he turned to his dad, to his mom. And he says, Mom, if I find Afikoman after it's hid and I get it, could I demand to see my father when I give it back? What do you answer a kid when he asks that? What do you answer to so many people who have to start saying Yizkor this year for the first year? We lost over 550,000 Americans, 17 million worldwide to this pandemic. What do you tell someone who has to start saying Yizkor? That's life. Toughen up. Live with it. The world sees so much sickness, so much poverty, so much suffering, so much hate, so much bigotry. And that's why on the last days of Passover, us Jews, we see the past. But we also, what keeps us going always is envisioning a future of redemption, a future of perfection, a future when the wolf will lie with the lamb, when we won't kill each other, we won't hate each other, people won't be preyed upon, people won't be molested, people won't be cheated, people will love. The world will be filled with the knowledge of God. That's what we celebrate on the last days of Passover. And that's why the rabbis instilled it, this Haftorah and this prophetic vision right before we say Yizkor. Because Yizkor, we remember the ones we lost, but we don't just give up. We work and we act by every good deed to make sure to bring this world to its perfection, to bring this world to what God wanted, desired, and demanded from us, to make this world a better place, to bring about redemption. And you say, how could I? What's the difference, right? What am I going to do? Well, we all know the story. We said it already so many times. 15 months ago, one guy in Wuhan sneezed, and he got 7.7 billion people on their knees, begging the world, stop. Your deed, my deed, our goodness, our positivity, our love, our caring. That's what's going to change the future. And as Jews, we have two types of time. We look to the past, but we also look to the future. We envision a world of perfection. And that's what gives us the strength and the courage to move forward. So to all those of you who lost a loved one in this past year, to all those of you that have lost loved ones that you miss, that you care about, that you want to be with, to all those of us that are lonely, that have suffered with mental health through this past year, I say to you, that's not life. Life is a world we envision of perfection, when the world will be perfect, when God will wipe away all tears from all of us. and He will give us love, family, and He will reunite us with our loved ones. Chag Sameach. Tonight is the special last 2 days of Passover. We light candles tonight. We have a festive meal tonight, and tomorrow night is the last day of Passover when we envision the future. And both days we'll have services at 10:30 in the morning. Tomorrow will be indoors with masks, of course. But Sunday, since we're expecting a big crowd to say Yizkor, we will be outdoors in the tent. Bring a coat. Come join us to remember and mourn and say Yizkor for those that we lost this year, and to envision a brighter world, a world full of future, full of hope, full of positivity, full of love, full of joy. God bless you. Chag Sameach, and see you over the holiday.